Hello, I'm Meeghan Truelove. I'm Schumacher's Director of Business Development for Creative Partnerships. And I'm super thrilled to be here today with ADAC. ADAC, thanks for having us to discuss the artistry of home with four incredible women. Any one of these women would be amazing to sit down with for an hour just on their own, but to have all four of them together is really a treat. And also I just should say that Schumacher's lucky enough to have all of them also as creative partners and collaborators. So they've developed really exquisite collections with us, and we're thrilled about that. So without further ado, let's introduce them and get the conversation going. Okay, Kelly Porter and Bridgett Cochran, based in Kansas City, Missouri, are the powerhouse duo behind Porter Teleo, a line of hand-printed, hand-painted wall coverings and fabrics. Their patterns are created with a variety of fine art processes, including wood blocking, painting, and sheen kohl. Their products merge the best of fine art and high design with bold patterning, distinctive color palettes, and a refined aesthetic. Welcome, Kelly and Bridget.
Thank you. Thanks.
Jackie Gendel. Jackie is a fine artist based in Providence, Rhode Island, where she's also an assistant professor of painting at the Rhode Island School of Design. Her lively, engaging paintings are the results of an intensely inquisitive practice centered on making connections and gaining an intimate understanding of her materials. And Colette. Colette Constantino is a fine artist and decorative painter based in Santa Barbara, California, where she creates artwork that invokes the feelings of spray on your lips and experience what it's like to run through a forest chasing fireflies. While Colette's drive to paint is personal, the narratives she paints are intended to captivate the viewer in such a way that they experience their own sort of inspiration. Welcome to all of you ladies, and I can't wait to dive in. And you know, we at Schumacher thought that one of the reasons why it would be so fun to gather you all here together is that you all of your work, some of you, you know, in a variety of ways, but all of your work really starts with some sort of fine art practice and incorporates that. And so I would love to just go around the grid, and I know everybody's Zoom grid probably looks different, but I'll just use mine here and just hear a bit from each of you to kind of introduce us all to your work and your background, just what your creative practice was like at the beginning, and how and when you came to it, to making things and to falling in love with making things. So Kelly and Bridget, do you want to start?
Sure. Kelly and I started Porter Teleo 16 years ago this year. My background is in interior design and Kelly's background is in fine art. The idea behind the line originally and currently as well was to bring the very best things of both of those worlds together, relying on the practices used in fine art for inspiration and the interior designer's use of the product to be incorporated into that as well, so that we could have beautiful creative things that were also repeatable and predictable for our clients to use in their homes.
Mm-hmm. And did you both, like when you were kids, Bridget, were you one of those kids who was like rearranging the furniture at home? And Kelly, were you kind of like, did you have a paintbrush in your hand at an early age, or like when did that creative spark start for you?
So my mom always said I needed to rip out the carpet in my bedroom and that she would just put a drain in my bedroom when I was a kid, because that was just more appropriate for the person that I was, just, you know, right from the beginning, just always breaking things down and recreating them and making something out of nothing. Definitely a lot of art and background and fine art and everything. But just from a creative standpoint, even with games and just board games and anything that I was able to get my hands on as a child was kind of reinvented and repurposed. And I know Bridget would, I know that you would always be rearranging your furniture as a child.
Yes. It was actually like a family activity on the weekends to go from aunt's house to aunt's house and swap things between them. And every weekend you came home to a different kind of arrangement.
Amazing. Colette, how about you?
I grew up in an environment where there were no artists, or there was no thing as a profession as an artist. It was something you did as a hobby. Mm-hmm. And you got, you became a nurse, or you became, like just the more functional. And so while I was encouraged in some ways, in other ways I was not, I just told to set that aside. And so I had a lot of jobs that I was not very happy with. But innately, I was always just bursting with the idea of creating things and creating art. And anytime I would see a painting or be out in the world, I would just be, just taking it all in to such an extent where it was inevitable that I would eventually find my way.
And I know that you've told me a really fun story that came to mind as Kelly was talking about her mom ripping her carpeting out of her room as a kid. Is that, will you just tell us quickly the story about being a kid and your mom just kind of letting you have at it in the kitchen?
Sure. My mom, I think, just got tired of scolding me because at 3 feet high as a 4-year-old, I kept with the crayons on the kitchen walls, She claims I drew ducks. I don't know if I drew ducks at 4 years old, but maybe I did. I don't know. But I love to draw on walls, and she let me. And so that was her wall covering. Crayola scribbles all the way around the perimeter.
And Jackie, that makes me think actually about your Schumacher pattern, Toile de Femme, and how you talked about letting your kids kind of like having a fantasy of letting them color it in. And maybe we can get to that a little bit later, but I'd love to hear just about your background also in terms of coming to your practice and, kind of like when that creative spark really kind of got hold of you.
Yeah, I grew up in a really creative household. My dad is an architect, and my grandfather was a concert violinist and songwriter, like country songwriter. And
Cool.
My mom, it was just a very creative person who, kind of filled our house with interesting objects to examine and look at and kind of spark our curiosity. And I feel like our weekends were spent like kind of all going into the car and going to architectural sites and process and climbing on things. And, we definitely went to museums and were exposed to a lot of art. So I just feel like it was just part of the kind of family spirit that I came up in.
Early on. And so one of the things that, I'm in awe of with the four of you also is that you managed to take this kind of like love for making, whether it was drawings or spaces or whatever it was, and actually grow up to turn that into your work, like your actual like professional work. And so I just would love to hear from each of you also a bit about what that transition was like. If there was a moment where you were like, okay, I'm going to do this, like I'm going to make this happen. I'm sure a lot of people watching right now are interior designers themselves and have had, a similar thing of just having this creative drive and this love of making things that they also have turned into careers. And I find it so inspiring. So I'm going to go counterclockwise on my grid. And Jackie, will you tell us about what that was like for you to turn this, this love of making into actually kind of like your profession?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's interesting because my brother was the one who was kind of the more talented, like naturally talented artist. And I was always just in awe of everybody around me who, you know, I was like an admirer almost and a little bit shy about my own. And I think at some point I just made the decision that I was pretty young, you know, but I was self-aware, you know, that I didn't have that sort of, you know, it was always something that I was self-conscious of rather than it just coming out. And at some point I decided, oh, I could just fake it, you know? And so I, you know, sort of fake it till you make it sort of thing. So I don't know. I just like kind of announced that it was what I was going to do. And I practiced and I loved doing it. And so, you know, I had supportive family when I said I wanted to go to art school. And then when I got to art school, it was as if I'd found my people and it was what was natural. I didn't have, you know, you're kind of, you're young, you're blind in your youth. So I didn't have like any of the sort of like realistic, you know, like what it's actually like to be an artist or do that. So I think that I think that really helped me to just, you know, the practice and the following, just having faith that if I kept doing what I was doing, I would figure it out.
Sometimes it's good to not know.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, it's great to know. It's great to know, but sometimes it's also really helpful to not know and just do and figure it out.
I was very stubborn about it. Like I really refused to.
I love it. Colette, how about you? What was that like for you, transitioning into really, you know, making a living from your work?
It has been an ebb and a flow over the course of a number of years. I would pop into the art world and give it my all. And then also there was the, you know, you have to make a living, you have to pay your bills, you know, and so I would be out of the art world for a very long time. I started here in Santa Barbara in an accidental career of being a decorative artist. So there's a lot of waves to ride in that regard. Then I would go out and then you know, my last big job was I was a real estate agent for a little while. And that was really the defining moment. After that, it just didn't suit and it zapped me of all my creativity. And I couldn't even, no. So then, I was listening to Tony Robbins at the time. And he said, you got to burn your bridges behind you and just, you know, extreme action or whatever it is he says. And you know what? I was like, yeah, that's where I'm at. And so I left it all be and I decided this I'm doing. And I'm so grateful for Instagram because it's really the platform that has allowed me to blossom and become and be able to do this for a full, you know, as a living full time. And it's, I would never, I love it so much. It's, I hope for more. It's really great.
Amazing. Kelly and Bridget, will you tell us what it was like for you guys? And I know that you have sort of like a braided story that you individually each kind of like were on career paths and then together formed Porter Teleo. So you could just tell us a little bit about how you kind of individually decided to make that leap into doing what you love professionally, and then how you met and launched Porter Teleo.
Sure. So my kind of path before I met Bridget was really traditional classical studying of fine art in art school and grad school for fine art as well. And I've maintained a really dedicated studio practice this entire time. So maybe about 20 to 25 years or so of maintaining a really focused fine art practice. And I believe it was 16 years ago that Bridget and I met and started Porter Teleo. And at that point, my work was already really pattern driven and color driven, but I was finding it limiting in certain ways because I wanted to get really site specific, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And you can only make a canvas so large. It was kind of getting ridiculously large. And Bridget had this, and I'll let her speak about her braided part of the story, but it was almost like this perfect synergy of a combination of what we both wanted on our own paths and coming together. And then also the necessity of these two skill sets, like the skill set that she has and the skill set that I have, and taking that combination to create something way bigger and better than either one of us could do on our own.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So I was working in interior design, and I had a strong passion for textiles and wall coverings. It was always my favorite part of any project. And so it was kind of a dream of mine to have my own line of wall coverings and textiles, but it was just that, a dream, something that, I didn't think was necessarily ever going to come to fruition. And it's so interesting how quickly from, the basic conversation of a very abstract idea of Porter Teleo coming to life, how quickly the energy that is between Kelly and I took that from an abstract idea all the way through to creating our first collection in the studio. I want to say it was maybe 8 weeks from that to the next step. And, that's indicative of where we were in our lives. We were completely untethered. We had zero risk aversion. And those, like you said, sometimes it's better not to know. I think if we had known everything we know now, we would have been fearful. And instead we were filled with optimism and excitement. And I think excitement was what really, fueled us forward. And like you were saying, Colette, I absolutely love this work. And I've found that I've grown creatively. In the early days, I was nervous about working in pattern. And obviously Kelly had a more sophisticated handle on that from her years of painting. But over the years, I've grown in that practice too, and find that, I'm creating things that I'm very proud of also. So it's been so interesting to grow in the ways that you knew you would grow, and then also in the ways that you couldn't have foreseen.
And like what I'm hearing from all four of you also, it's just that kind of like locking in, just like locking your sights on it and just doing it, and just kind of following where it goes, which is amazing. So I would love to hear also about what it was like to start taking your practice and start to think about that and translating it into goods for the home. And we can talk about the Schumacher stuff in a bit. For the first part of the question, I would love to just hear, kind of like the more sort of like theoretical part of that, kind of what was it like to, start thinking about designing for walls and for something that somebody might live with, as opposed to your own fine art practice. Colette, do you want to jump in?
Sure. As a decorative painter, that was really the first thing that happened. Here in Santa Barbara in the late 90s and the early 2000s, that was really big, was painting directly on people's walls and creating wall coverings that way, and murals and ceilings, a lot of ceilings. And so it was very natural to paint, and also not to even have any fear, just to beauty of paint, as you can always over it if it doesn't turn out. But for the most part, everything worked okay. And it, you have to be very honed in on right and what's aesthetically pleasing to the homeowner, to the majority, also being historically minded. Like for me, I was working in people's homes and they were Spanish style and it's specific period. So, just being very mindful of all the elements that make good design.
Mm-hmm. And Jackie, how about you? I know that I actually don't know 100%, but I feel like I know 99% that this collection you just did with Peg Norris for Schumacher of wallpapers was like your first foray into kind of thinking about, you know, kind of something living in somebody's home beyond like one of your pieces that someone might have as, you know, as part of their collection. But, you know, thinking about wallpaper, like, wow, what was that like as a painter and a fine artist to think about making wallpapery things, like in terms of scale or anything, pattern?
I mean, I had always daydreamed actually about having the opportunity to make crossover work, you know, that you know, dealt with, I mean, I in some ways I didn't consider it that different from my work, like the paint, the wallpaper, I feel like is part of my work in a lot of ways, like in my paintings, like I always think about the social, and like they're often people that are like coming together and disintegrating, and like, and I love to think about like how different paintings or objects in the room kind of talk to each other. So the idea of making a wall covering, and like something else I'd like to do in my paintings is just draw connections between different kind of historical ideas, or, you know, finding meaning in as many ways as possible. So it really like made a lot of sense for me to like start thinking as, you know, like as not just somebody making paintings, but as like objects that were furniture or wall coverings as well, and how they all could speak to each other, and then in turn like speak with like the kind of like socialness that happens in a house.
And did thinking, like, was there anything about, you know, working in repeat for wallpapers that was kind of like a new, you know, exploration, or had you already been working with repeat in your own fine art practice?
Yeah, I've been really interested in ideas of like seriality and sequence. So like seriality where something repeats, you know, think like Monet or Warhol, you know, or sequence where things change and it tells a story. And so at first I was coming up with these like kind of wild ideas where something could repeat and change over time. I think it was like a little bit too complex for people to wrap their heads around, you know, but I feel like this is definitely things I can like take into my own work too, in so many different ways, you know, just, you know, I just love the idea of a repeat, and how, you know, you wake up every day and it's, you know, the morning again, but there's similarities, but there's differences too. And it's kind of like a fallacy, the idea that things repeat themselves. It's more like they rhyme, you know? And so I feel like, yeah, I love that.
So cool. And Kelly and Bridget, what was it like for you guys? Like, Kelly, did you, like, once you guys launched Porter Teleo and you started like thinking about pattern and repeat that could be like wall scale, like, was that new and liberating, or did it feel like you were already exploring in your work? And Bridget, did you find that like you, with your like interior design background, could kind of like help to sort of like guide how the patterns were evolving for the home? Like, what was that like for you guys?
I think it's interesting. I think there are certain limitations to what all of us are doing and making, and then there's certain ways that processes are unveiled or opened up in different avenues of creating different types of product. And so that's what's interesting about crossing over, not only from fine art to making wall coverings and textiles, but also in our collection with Porter Teleo, everything that we do is painted. So working with Schumacher and being able to enter into the area of printing, and allowing different capabilities of different types of repeats. I mean, this can get fairly technical, but we're always aware of our tools and the tools that we have that work well and the tools that we don't have, and what our limitations are. And we focus more on what we can do, that either no one else can do, or what we can do that's our true talent, or, you know, something really particular to our actual talent and our particular kind of code of what we're making that no one else is really doing. And just trying to focus more on the possibilities versus the limitations. And because there are so many limitations within, once you get into making product, with the mills, or, you know, your staff, or the artists, or the actual hands that are making them, you know, controlling colors,
to live with it,
side matching, all of
Time.
those things. Yeah, time is always one that we're like, well, it's beautiful, but it'll only take 2 days to make each panel, you know?
right.
Which was great working with Schumacher, because we were able to take some of those ideas that would have been too time restrictive in our studio. We were able to execute some of those ideas through the printed collection that we did with them, and wouldn't have wanted to do it with anybody else, because the way it was handled and executed was so perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's kind of like a perfect segue. So let's talk about your Schumacher goods and the making of those. Because for me, one of the things that I love the most about working on our creative collaborations and partnerships is that, you know, we are really, really particular about who we want to work with, you know, because for us, the collaborations and the partnerships are like really opportunities for partnerships. And like, you know, like it's the most fun, and it's the juiciest and most creative when like our partners also show up just like ready to go, like with, you know, like so many ideas. And our studio is amazing, our in-house studio, and these collaborations kind of become these conversations between these like really incredibly talented people that develop into product. And I just love watching it transpire. And as a kind of a way for us to kind of like get into talking that, I know that we asked you to just pick one Schumacher pattern to talk about kind of the making of it and maybe the inspiration behind it. And Kelly and Bridget, I believe you guys chose Traverse, which Annie just put up on the screen. So this is a Porter Teleo design that Kelly and Bridget did for Schumacher. Will you tell us a little bit about how this happened and the inspiration behind it, and anything you want to tell us about it?
Sure. So you might like this story just because it's a little funny. But we made the original painting for this pattern by creating a very special and particular tool that was made out of Q-tips taped together to a piece of foam. So, I mean, super high tech, right? But
you just kind of made sort of like a Q-tip comb and then dipped it in the paint and kind of dragged it.
Yeah, and then
That's
we
so cool.
dipped it into really saturated acrylic ink. So it wasn't paint, but ink, so it stayed transparent. So when those little cotton balls are dragging on what we use, which is a really toothy Japanese paper that has a lot of texture to it, it just picks up that ink like that. So you just get all of those really, really, you know, the subtle nuances of the transparency. So it's simple, but it's kind of a cool story.
And
So
also
beautiful.
Kind of the perfect marriage between Porter Teleo and Schumacher, and that it's, you know, we love the way Schumacher always has a fresh take on things that sometimes are considered traditional. So, you know, a plaid, but then also using our tools in a way that we would never be able to use them in our own studio. This is not a repeat that we could execute without everyone losing their minds.
Right.
And so to see it come to life through you all was wonderful.
And for Schumacher to be able, I believe this is digitally printed, because the digital printing allows the ability to capture that kind of like that handmade quality. So yeah, I mean, as you said, Bridget, just like such a fun marriage of how driven by the art of the hand, your work is at Porter Teleo, and just kind of this toolkit of techniques that the Schumacher Creative Studio is just really genius at deploying and kind of putting those together to make this pattern that's been so widely received. And we actually have it even hanging up outside the wall of our design studio in Manhattan. And it's the first thing you see as soon as you get off the elevator. And anybody who's been up there for the first time is always like, oh my gosh, what is that? It's just,
I would say to give us credit for it is really not fair, because the team of yours that managed to get this to work was they really worked on it and they really got it to be, you know, just perfect without losing the handmade really element of the hand and the little bit of organic, you know, ebb and flow that it has. So,
and the balance of imperfection in it that keeps it feeling as if it's handmade. They did a great job of balancing all of those things.
and for anyone watching who hasn't seen this pattern yet, it's also enormous. It's got a really large scale, like so much of Porter Teleo's work, and it's really fun. So if you haven't seen it yet, you can go to Schumacher's website and just search for Porter Teleo, and their whole collection will come up, and you can, you know, click through the various images to get a better idea of it. But it's such a wonderful pattern. Jackie, do you want to talk through the Golden Age?
Sure.
Okay.
So the Golden Age, the term, or l'âge d'or, my French is horrible, but it comes from Greek mythology. You might recognize it from Greek mythology and from poetry, and it basically denotes a period of peace and harmony and stability and prosperity. You know, where wild animals and people dance together. You know, it's similar to the Garden of Eden. And subsequent eras like the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, things tend to get worse and worse and worse. But the kind of idealism of this time is a fiction, and it's a fiction about a past that was better. And of course, it's not really true, but it's a theme that I've returned to in my work many times. And so so this one was based on that sort of idea.
And so I was also going to just mention for people who might not be familiar with this pattern yet, this also is an enormous scale. This is a 2-panel pattern, and you can see on the left-hand side, the woman reaching out, and then on the right-hand side, the hand coming in, holding the fruit, and those repeat. So it does actually connect and continue. And yeah, so this is an install shot, just kind of helping you understand the scale of the pattern in a room. And so Jackie, what was it like? You didn't paint this exactly to size, right? You painted it and then it got scanned in and scaled up, or tell us a little bit about actually making it.
If it wasn't to exactly size, it was close to size.
Okay.
Like I think it might have been to scale. I'm not positive. Like I made, I didn't make all the women at the same time. You know, like I made them. I made parts of. I had the whole drawing done, and then I made the women individually, and they had to be, you know, kind of moved around. There was a lot of back and forth editing between which women, because I made more women than we ended up using. And, you know, we were rearranging them and trying to figure out, and there was a lot of back and forth between the hands, because I wasn't completely happy with the hands. And then, you know, like I would draw a number of new hands and send them back and forth. And like one had the apple, and one was holding like a branch, and one was, you know, it was really kind of lovely working with everybody. And I feel like the Peg Norris team and the Schumacher team like helped rein me in, because I think I would have like stayed in the brainstorm mode where I was just coming up with hundreds of ideas left and right. I could have stayed there forever, and they helped me choose, you know, kind of limit that. And then when it came to refining, you know, I feel like I had some really specific things that I saw, and they would have things that they saw too. So it was really great.
Mm-hmm. And what did you use to draw the figures? And then what did you use to create the stippling pattern?
So the figures were drawn just with brush and ink. And like I said, they're a little bit larger than life. And then the stippling, I actually made my own brushes using wigs. And
So cool.
Yeah, so I wanted to make marks that were really like unusual and specialized and completely mine. And so that's how I made those marks.
Wigs and Q-tips. I love it.
Yeah,
Like
I
this
know.
is the essence of like the artistry of home, really.
Yeah, you have to make your own tools.
Sometimes, yeah, to make the mark you want to make. So beautiful.
Thank you.
And Colette, I know your collection just launched. Do you, as you see it kind of emerging into the world, do you have a favorite pattern yet?
I am particularly attached. I'm proud of them all.
Yeah.
I am particularly attached to Brindle. Yes, this is the first piece that I painted in my studio. So it kind of marks a special moment in time. And it was so fun to be able to just paint freely. And, Coco Chanel said it best. She said, always be of the mindset that something wonderful is about to happen or magical is about to happen. And that is my approach to all my designs. And I think especially this one, as it's this, forest that, who knows, there's the light behind it and you can walk through, and what's going to happen next? It's going to be an adventure.
And this also is enormous, a multi-panel design that's just so transporting. And for people who aren't familiar with it, there is actually, it's hard to see here, but there's metallic detailing, right?
I believe it's the other design. I don't think this one does, but
Okay.
it's the other pattern that does. Yeah.
Because I know that's another reason for folks to go to Schumacher's website and look at Colette's collection, Colette Constantino, and look at Jackie's collection also, which I think you can find by entering Jackie Gendel and Peg Norris. But I know that those metallic details were something that that were really kind of like a real feat of like technical artistry. Okay.
This is the one that has the metallic bits and background, and it's very subtle, and it's more on the gold version of it, and it's remarkable. And my original fine artwork and most of my work have metallic elements, little bits, tiny little magical bits. And so it's so wonderful that Schumacher was able to bring that to life. And when you walk by, it'll change just ever so slightly.
I remember going through the design studio when you were working on this collection with the studio, and just, everyone just being obsessed with like getting those metallic details right, and kind of like color trials coming back from the mill and just being, it's not quite there yet. It's not quite there yet. Like, let's try it again. But the results are so exquisite that it was well worth the, kind of drilling down to make sure that the mill was able to nail it. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, so I also want to tell everybody who is watching that we are going to do a Q&A. I forgot to mention that at the top of the conversation. I should have done that, but if you have questions, I think you can just put them into the Q&A feature, and the folks at ADAC are going to make sure that we get a chance to look at those and address them. But I would actually love to hear from all of you what your own homes are like, however you want to, share that with us, like how does the space that you live in reflect you, and how do you use pattern and color in, your own spaces where you and your families live? Jackie, do you want to start?
Sure. We're in the process of we are building out a house, or we're improving it right now. We just moved in. So, but for the most part, our house is kind of a work in progress mishmash. Most of the things that I own were either given to me or traded for, it's all about the art, really. We have lots and lots of art by friends and people who we've had like really long special relationships with that we just love living with. And so, and then I'd say there's a lot of music and tons of books and a lot of space for just, we have a 4-year-old, so kind of creative imagine play and storytelling, and the kitchen is an important space. But right now it's more about the art than any sort of pattern and decoration, because that's kind of where we are.
Mm-hmm. Colette, how about you?
My art studio is mostly my home. I spend the most time here, and it is definitely my desire and my hope is to create an environment of complete acceptance and of imagination, inclusivity, and love. And I hope that I do that in my home when I welcome guests in, as well as here at the studio. And I would say it's pretty consistent throughout as far as the ring. And I'm secretly minimalist, but it sort of comes out, and I'm also a maximalist. Like, I'm trying to still figure it out. But more than anything, it's light and bright and welcoming more than anything.
Awesome. And Bridget and Kelly, how about you guys?
I like to use the words light and bright for my space as well. You might not believe it, but I have a little bit of a commitment problem when it comes to pattern for my own home.
I think that's true of a lot of interior designers. Yeah, you guys work with pattern and color so much.
Well, and you find one that you love, and then you find another that you love, and you realize that if you had gone with the first one that you loved, and it just goes on down the road. So Kelly and I put out at least 4 new patterns every year, and every year there's one that I am obsessed with during the design process, and that I'm absolutely going to use in any number of rooms in my home. And by the time we get it out, I love it and cherish it and wish it well, but I don't have it installed in my house. And my home is also just a home where kids can be comfortable, and we can be a family, and parts of each of us are represented.
And my home is fairly modern, and it does not contain a lot of color, actually, except in a couple of spots.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a bit earthy and modern combined. I'd say that's kind of my soul is almost like a tree or something. I feel like I was a tree in my last life. So my house kind of reflects that, a lot of brown and gray and beautiful whites. And I do have a little bit of Porter Teleo wall covering I have some in my dining room, which is like a blast of color, where the rest of the house is fairly minimal with color. And then special objects, lots of books and lots of art. And I really love old folk art, and especially international folk art. So I have some of that displayed, and those are just pieces that I love. And then my studio is attached to my home, which contains my oil painting practice, and I have my big etching press there. So, this is a big burly etching press, tackage press that weighs about 1,000 pounds.
Amazing.
It's, you know, it's definitely my own heaven, my home. And also, just like Bridget said, reflects children, dogs, all the good creatures that are running around in there. So
Life.
yeah, life. Yeah. Mhm.
Awesome. Great. Okay, well, let's do a quick rapid fire round of questions, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So I'm just going to call out a name and answer the question. 1 word, 2 words, totally fine. Okay, who's one of your creative heroes? Jackie.
Sonia Delaney.
Bridget.
Coco Chanel.
Colette.
Oprah Winfrey.
Kelly.
I'm just going to say any entrepreneur. They fascinate me.
Love it all. What's one of your favorite rooms or spaces of any time in any place? Colette.
The sitting next to the river Seine in Paris.
Kelly.
A tree house out in the middle of the jungle somewhere.
So nice. Jackie.
One summer, I was in Giverny with my husband. He had a Versailles residency, and we had the key to Monet's garden, and we would go in there at night. So Monet's garden at night.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's now my favorite Q&A. It hasn't even been there.
Yeah.
Bridget.
The outdoor dining space at Annabelle's in London.
Nice. Nice. And final question. What are you most looking forward to next? Kelly.
I'd say connecting with people in different places. The idea of travel and all of the aesthetic experiences that come from travel that we've all been missing.
Jackie.
Recently, I've been teaching myself how to do mosaic, and I'm going to make a big table. I'm excited about it.
Bridget.
I have to say travel too, and connecting with people. That's been something that I didn't realize how much I cherished until it was snatched away.
Mm-hmm. And Colette.
Well, there's so many exciting things, but I would say that unveiling and launching artful products with people in mind, there's a lot that will be happening over the next year or two. So it's very exciting.
Awesome. Great. Okay, well, I'm going to open up the chat box here and get to the questions. And we'll just do it organically, I want to try and get to all the questions, and we probably don't have time for everybody to answer. So as I read a question, if you guys feel moved to answer, just pop on in. Okay, first question. I'd love to know, let's see, where you are now in terms of like your career. I'd love to know what you did that you felt was like a pivot that led to your success. It's sort of like if you could look back and tell your younger self who's just starting out now one piece of advice, what would that be?
I can answer that. I would say just don't give up. Just keep moving forward, and don't look at your mistakes as the end. Look at them as beautiful opportunities to learn, and just keep moving forward. And before you know it, you'll be, somewhere that looks very close to where you wanted to be.
Awesome.
Yeah, I just want to say, in the words of Yoda, there is no try, there is only do.
Nice. We can all learn from Yoda.
Yes.
And to enjoy baby Yoda as well. Okay, let's see. What did you do when you were first starting out to really address your fear? How did you kind of, conquer the overwhelm?
when Bridget and I were very first starting, I think it was helpful that we absolutely had to do this for several years, and we kind of built it out of nothing, and we didn't have anything to fall back on. So we just had to keep going, and we had to continue taking risk after risk after risk without getting a ton of security right off the bat. And I think that, you just kind of get used to it in the beginning, but I think every success story, when you look back at it, is full of all of those mistakes. And that is, getting over the fear of making the mistakes and just letting them happen, and knowing that that's part of actually what's going to get you to the place that no one else could get to had you not gone on that specific path and hit all those bumps in the road. I think that's an important part of it. It's just, like Colette said, in doing it, it's a ton of hard work, and just get in there and roll your sleeves up and start doing it. And the fear kind of goes away, because you just kind of have to, you have to produce, or it's obviously not going to work. So
yeah, and when you have a little bit of fear, just be like, okay, I recognize that. All right, but that's like a thought from the past. We don't pay attention to that. You just don't listen to it, and you just do what you would do if you didn't have any fear.
Yeah, and what Jackie said earlier about the talent, that someone else in your family may have had more talent or something like that. I feel like I went to art school with so many more people that were a lot more talented than me. There's so much talent out there, but to reduce the fear and just believe in yourself and go for it, that's the thing that people need to do, instead of being too self-critical on your own expression. I mean, we all have something to give that's truly unique from everyone else.
I also want to add that I feel like it's important to find a community. Like I know that just having a really large peer group, and what I do particularly, where there used to be openings, and there was like a pretty large.
There will be again.
I know, so to being a fine artist, but just having people in and getting feedback, and also just knowing that failure is like a huge part of making stuff. Like you just cannot make any art without getting really used to failing and then going back and reworking it. I actually think that's what's one of the most special things about an art education, is that you spend like 50 hours working on something and it doesn't work, and you're like, okay, I'm starting over. It's just part of it. So
just making friends with the fear.
Yeah.
Awesome. So this is an interesting question too. So for somebody who loves original art but doesn't have a big budget, do you have any suggestions about how to buy artwork, start building a collection? What would you suggest?
There's a whole lot of like younger galleries, like in New York, for example, like the I'm assuming there's a lot of them will still be there in the end, but that show emerging artists and starting to kind of like follow those, like that scene of you don't necessarily need to start at Gagosian as the place to buy your work. There's a lot of really small galleries, and supporting young artists is a great thing to do.
I would also say local artists. There's nothing more endearing than having the artist or in your community, and supporting a local artist who is just working so hard and creating good work. I think that's a good way to begin your collection as well.
And locally, the art schools in every city, going to the art schools and going to the thesis shows and seeing that work before it's, like right when it's super emerging and fresh.
Awesome. Okay, we have 4 minutes, which I think gives us time for just one more question. Any tricks that you would recommend to developing a consistent practice? in terms of like an art practice?
Show up. I would say show up. Just show up, whether you're feeling it, whether you're not. Schedule it and just show up. It's not a hobby. You
So
make it
easy
happen.
to say, so difficult to do.
I think deadlines are really important. So I always schedule an exhibition 2 years out. So I'll have 2 whole years to work on a solo show. And I think that having a deadline is the best thing, because then you can open everything up in your studio practice to explore anything in that amount of time. So you can go down any path. You don't have to do what you've done before. That's really important, I think. I mean, I think so many artists just get stagnant because they're locked into something. It may be commercialized or, you know, just not really going anywhere because it gets stagnant. So I think if you just have a deadline and then you open it up and you're unveiling and investigating and exploring.
I would just add to consistently be working on it, because when you're thinking of, you know, for example, when I'm thinking of creating a new collection or patterns to be considered for one of our next collections, it can seem really overwhelming. But if you can just consistently be chipping away at it, working in some capacity toward the end goal, I think things happen slowly but surely. They don't happen in a big burst of magic.
I think also just giving yourself sort of the room to play and to fail and not. I know sometimes when I get stuck or don't know what to do, I'll just like watercolor. I'll put on a book on tape, like a dumb one, in watercolor, and just try to enjoy what I'm doing and not think too hard as a way to just get going. And I feel like if somebody is just starting, you know, like you might need to like take the pressure off, you know, and try to just, you know, make a small assignment for yourself, or, you know, play.
Let's end on the note of play. I love it. You women are amazing. Thank you so much for joining me for this hour. ADAC, thank you for having us. Anyone watching, go to Schumacher's website, fschumacher.com, to check out their beautiful work. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Meeghan. Thank you, Meeghan.
Bye. See you soon.
Bye-bye.